So we're back again to break down another critical trick for learning how to skate. It's time to cover the drop in. Dropping in is maybe one of the scariest tricks you're going to learn. It's really hard to overcome that fear of moving from the coping onto the steep tranny and survive, because we all have that fear of falling forward. Falling backwards is the more common one. We're going to get into that. We're going to talk about the fear that's involved and how that plays tricks with your head and how to overcome that through understanding knowledge and knowing what the skills are that you need. And we're going to talk about some of those common mistakes and make sure you understand how those things happen, so that before you try your first one, you know what to do and what not to do. We're going to get into the detail of all the fundamentals so that you can practice and learn those fundamental movements one at a time. So instead of just going up and trying to tackle the drop in, you can learn one piece of the movement at a time until you can connect all those pieces together. We'll get into some easy progression steps to help you with just that, so that you really have high confidence in knowing what it feels like when you do what you have to do. And that's the key. If you know what the movements are supposed to feel like, what it feels like to have your foot connected to the board and all those different things that we're going to do, what it feels like to tip your lead leg forward, what it feels like to move your core forward, what it feels like to tip your spine forward, and all those different things, what it's going to feel like when the board touches down on the tranny, what pumping might feel like. All these different things are a part of this puzzle. And let's make sure you know what each one of those is. We're going to get into a recommendation for you to make it easy for your first drop-in, so you don't even have to go from the top of the coping. You can actually practice this down low with the help of a friend, and a simple trick that I use for a lot of students to help them get over their fear of this. Then I'll show you some steps that you can use for hands-on help if you have a friend that can help you to overcome your first drop-ins, and work right up to what to think about when it's time for you to drop in. Before you do any of this, that you feel ready. You have to know that it's the right time to do this. Don't need anybody to pressure you into it. That's how all those videos on YouTube out there of people crashing when they drop in and slipping backwards and all those things happen, is because you just get pushed into it before you're really ready, before you understand the movements, before you have the balance. Take your time, build the skills, get real familiar with what it's going to feel like before you do the trick. It sounds like a trick. It sounds like that's impossible. How can you know what it's supposed to feel like before you actually try it? But there are ways for you to simulate it and connect to some of those sensations. And I want to make sure you know what each one of those movements will feel like to the best of our ability in this video, so that you can connect those dots and practice them one at a time until you can put them all together and execute a perfect drop-in. All right, on that, let's break this thing down. Okay, so here we are getting ready to drop in. And this is I always recommend that you find the best transition, the best spot for you to drop in. And that's going to be the most gentle transition that you can find. So transitions are usually cut on different radiuses, right? So you have, everything from a vert ramp, where it goes to vert and then to transition. What we're really looking at is, what is the length of the radius that it takes to get to vertical. And a lot of transitions in skate parks are cut on 6s, or sometimes even tighter than that, like 5s and things like that. They're really tight and they're very difficult to use. So you're going to want to watch out for those types of locations. Look for something that's cut on more like an 8-foot radius. So if we look at that, what's that radius right there? Look for something, let's see if we can get that more in the center. There we go. Look for something that's more like an 8-foot radius, which is going to look really gentle and smooth, but on a shorter transition. So the height that I always use for my students when they're learning is, I look for something that's like 2 to 3 feet high and on a big open radius, 7 to 8 foot radius. And you can tell just by looking at it. Just look at the intensity of it, and just find that spot where you get a nice smooth tranny that's going to be really gentle, low angle, and the coping works for you. Everything looks good. You got plenty of deck space to balance on at the top, and everything feels good, because aesthetics make a difference. If it looks scary to you, it's going to be scary, and then it's going to feel, you won't even be able to become aware of the feeling. So this is the first fear factor, is if you pick the wrong transition to drop in on, your mind knows it. And every transition you try to drop in on for the first time is going to be a little intimidating, but you trust your instincts, trust your gut, and know that if it's in a narrow spot, if the run out is sketchy and you got to go drop in right to a, you know, a bank or a roll or something like that, you know, be prepared and understand that you want to pick the environment that gives you the least amount of fear from the aesthetics of that environment. So how it looks, be really, really selective, and it'll help you find that right spot. The next piece is just make sure, and I said this in the intro, but make sure that you have all the tools you need before you get there. So we're going to dive right into breaking down how the drop-in works, and then I'm going to walk you back through some skills and tools to help you progress to it. But be really sensitive to making sure you have the skill that you need to feel confident on your skateboard, and you know how to position your feet, you know how to ride with your foot on the tail versus, you know, on top of the wheels, for example. So make sure that you know how to adjust your feet and what that's going to feel like. I mean, just knowing what the board's going to feel like underfoot when you go from balanced on the tail to dropping in and slamming those wheels down, and knowing if your foot is off a little bit, how that's going to affect you when you drop in. I mean, if your foot's favoring the toe side edge, you might start carving towards the toes when your front wheels drop in. If you're favoring the heel side edge, you might go that way. If your foot's too far towards the middle, you may not have enough leverage. You might fall backwards, right? So you got all these things. You got to know foot position. You got to know exactly what that's going to look like and feel like, and make sure you're highly familiar with foot position before you drop in. So it's a great place to start. So pick that learning environment, know foot position, and prepare yourself that way. Watch that a couple of times here. Just let it play. Let you guys see what it looks like. And then we're going to break it down. Maybe watch it in slow one time. So you can see right here, this is really interesting, but look at me position my foot. We'll come back to that. I want you to watch the whole thing in slow-mo. All right, there we go. And when you play it backwards, you can see, sometimes it's nice to watch things forward and backwards and get a feel for what it looks like. But you can see everything you need to see here, from the way I start out standing, right, to what I do when I put my front foot on, and then start to watch the body and what's going on there. Watch the legs, and there's that drop in. Here it is again. Okay, let's get into this. First thing first, look at how I'm holding the board and how I place it on the coping, even how I walk up to the coping, because that's one of the scarier things. When you walk up to the coping, it feels like, even if you're only 2 feet high from the deck to the flat bottom, you know, if that's 2 feet, it's still going to feel kind of scary, because you don't know if it's going to work out the first time you go. And for a while after, you're going to have that lack of confidence. It'll get easier, but it's something you need to practice routinely to build confidence with and own. So as I walk up, notice I put my front foot off to the heel side edge, to the back side edge of the board, and it's right there at the coping. And I keep my back foot way back here, right? So this allows me, I'm close enough to lean over, but I've got some balance and stability back there. And just to kind of highlight it a little bit, right? So my front foot is over here, my back foot's over here, right? And then as I go to set the board down, you can see all I have to do is lean a little forward. See me shifting my weight even up onto my front foot there. And I'm going to now get ready once I have that board in position. Now this is a critical thing. So let me clear these drawings real quick. Notice that where I place the tail, right? So the tail is all the way back here. The wheels are butted up against the coping. So this is the coping right along this line, right? This is pool coping, so it looks a little different than the metal, but there's just a little round bump there if you're not familiar with it. And I push the skateboard back until I feel the wheels bump into the coping. and the tail is contacted. And these are really important steps, right? So the wheels are pushed back, tail's down. I'm holding the nose of the board very carefully, and I'm getting ready to place my back foot on the board. Okay, so let's go ahead and take a look. As we get into this, as I put my back foot on, now this is the next really key thing. Notice that my balance has shifted to my front foot. I'm goofy, I skate goofy, so I'm right foot forward. And right here, you can see I am very carefully balanced on this foot. I've got my body bent over here to create counterbalance. It's just be conscious of this, because it all, first time you do it, these are things that if you wobble up there because you're losing balance and you're getting scared, it's pretty easy to do that. And it's very common to feel very nervous about this. So it's okay for that, for you to do that. Just make sure you've got your back foot balance, balance on your front foot, and you're stable and you're moving slowly and methodically, very carefully, okay? Watch where I place my back foot. This is gonna be really important. So right here, I get my back foot, you can see the inside edge of my back foot is in the crease, right? So, and for those of you who don't know what the crease is, that's just where your tail bends up from the deck. So right here is the crease line, because you can see that the shape of that board curving right here, right? So there's that curve where it goes from, you know, the flat part of the deck of your board, right? Flat part of the board to the tail of the board, right there. So this edge of my foot is right kind of in the edge of that crease right there. All right, next piece to recognize is that my heel, the heel of my foot is actually going to rest on the concrete to hold the board. So my heel right back here is touching concrete, and I am carefully balancing on the heel of that back foot all the way across the length of the foot. So from way back here, right, all the way across the length on this back edge of my foot right there. That's where my balance is. So my balance is all along the back edge back here. So if I draw that line, it's all along that back edge of the back foot. And I'm keeping it there because that way I know I've got contact pressure where the board is touching the concrete. My heel is on the concrete, so the board won't slip away. Now I should be able to take my hand away from that and balance freely. And you want to practice this a few times. Practice balancing, releasing the nose until it stabilizes, right? And just practice picking your foot up, putting it down a few times. And you should be able to do this without falling down. Now, my back leg, I want you to notice, is not straight. So my back leg is bent. Right here, I'm going to keep a little bit of bend in this knee right there, and this ankle down here is flexed pretty significantly, right? So I've got bend in those joints really clearly. The knee is bending, the ankle is bending, and I'm bending even a little bit right here in that hip socket to create balance. So my spine is actually tipping forward a little bit. Make sure that you don't stand on a locked out leg. You don't want to rise up when you stand onto the tail of your board. You want to have that back leg flexed a little bit, and then just practice very simply. So we just want to practice that move right there. That pick the knee up, right? Touch the nose of the board, right? Put it back. You want to be really careful that when you touch the nose of the board, you don't push the nose down. That could be pretty detrimental because you could cause yourself to slip, right, when you're not ready. So no weight on the front foot when you're putting there. All your balance is on the back foot, and you're practicing that move. Now note right where I place my front foot. So when I practice putting my front foot in position across my board at the angle I want it. So whatever that angle is for you for your front foot, I like mine slightly angled forward. And I place it right on top of the trucks, just slightly behind the two front bolts. So when you're looking at that foot, you'll be covering the bolts pretty much completely or slightly behind. If you go too far ahead of the bolts, then you run the risk of having too much pressure on the nose. And when your board lands in the tranny, you can actually overpressure the front wheels if you're doing things right and cause yourself to fall forward. So make sure you pick the right spot. Keep your front foot just inside those bolts. So you want that front foot to cover the bolts or be slightly behind, your choice, somewhere right in here. If you get too far up here towards what's known as the crease right there, if you get too far up into the crease, that's when you start to overload your wheels, and you can cause the wheels to bind and slow down through friction, and then you fall forward, right? So be careful about that one. Make sure that you position that foot right where you want it, at just the angle you want. Don't start with your foot pointed forward and then try to turn it as you drop in. Place that foot in the position you want to have it in when you land, and start pumping out of the training. All right. So now, from here, this is where it gets really interesting, and there's a lot to look at, and this is the stuff you really want to understand, okay? Because it has to do with the alignment of the body and how we're moving all of our weight, our mass, what I a lot of times call your core, that big chunk of mass right here in the middle. Let me go ahead and highlight that for you again. This area of your body where you kind of got your gut, your butt, and your upper legs, that chunk of your body is where centrally the most concentrated amount of your weight proportionally is really located. So we call it the core. This is really important, knowing what to do with this core, because this core right here, okay, it has to move forward. So it has to go this way. And kind of, you know, if you clear that, it really has to move like this. Forward a little bit, and then it has to move down in the direction you're trying to go. So we're trying to move that core forward and kind of forward and down. So you can think of it as like a downward diagonal movement, but all you really have to think about when you start out, because you're standing level to the deck, is you think about your core moving. If this is the training, your core moves forward out over the front foot so that we can get mass and weight over the front foot. All right, so as you watch the first steps here, let's see if it follows that sort of path that I drew out with the arrows. Let's take it back a little bit, and you can see the core. I get my foot position. Look at me, I'm grinding that foot around, making sure I like it, right? And that's just a nervous habit that I have. I think I've developed it over a lot of years. I just kind of keep wiggling it until it feels just right, and I do it as I move forward. And you can see, watch right here. When I say move forward, watch my core start to shift along the line of that arrow. There it goes. Now here's the really important thing. Look at how far forward it is now. And notice my nose hasn't even begun to drop. So right now, my core has shifted well along that line from its original place. I mean, it was way back here, right? And center was somewhere in here. Now it's shifted up there. And take note that the nose of my board has not begun to drop down yet. So I'm drawing my core forward and over the front foot, and I'm keeping that front knee. Let's clear these drawings out so we'll make it a little clearer. The nose is still up here. The front knee is pulled up towards the chest. And look at the angle of my leg relative to my board. So normally when you stand on a skateboard, your leg would be along this line, kind of tilted towards your hips, but pretty straight up and down relative to that board, perpendicular to the skateboard, right? But for this drop into work, I've got to get this front leg to tip forward from where it normally would be. So let's watch that movement. Let's watch how the ankle right here, the knee, and the hip work together to allow this leg to tip forward so that your core can move forward without pushing the nose of the board down. Keep in mind, I keep saying that. You don't even move the nose of the board down until you get your body forward. And then once your body's forward, once your core is forward, you're going. There's no going back from there. So know that you have to be willing to create this position, right, so that you can drop in effectively. And you want to practice this feeling a lot of times before you take it to a transition. So let's clear these drawings out again. Take a quick look here. Okay, and note, here I am, back here in that original position. I start to flex that lead ankle, knee, and hip. Look at that knee bending. The ankle is really bent too. The hip is bending. That's allowing my core to move forward. The nose still hasn't dropped down yet. Still hasn't dropped down. Still hasn't dropped down. Still hasn't dropped down. Look how far forward I am. Still there. It's just starting to drop down right there. So look at the position that my body is in. Now, here's a really important thing to understand. The weight hasn't massively moved off that back foot yet, just to be clear. It's moved a little. So even though it looks like I'm dramatically out over my front foot, it's still very subtle. But it requires that much body movement to create that subtle shift in weight. Let's say we need to move 5 or 10% of our weight forward for a drop in. Well, look at how much movement is required to do that. So let's look at it right here, kind of highlight a couple things. Note that the ankle, look at how flexed that ankle is. Look at how flexed that knee is. Look how flexed this hip is. And now take a look at the line of the shoulders, right? So the shoulders are pointed down. That means my spine, my spine is really on a line. Let's see if I can draw it out here for you. My spine is really on a line that goes kind of along this shape right there to my shoulder. So it's curved and it's tilting forward as that shoulder tips down. I'm not lifting that shoulder up. If I were to lift that shoulder up, then I'm running into a serious issue right here. If this shoulder goes up, that means my spine is going to tip back. My weight is going to transfer to this back foot, and I'm in a lot of trouble, right? So that's what we want to avoid. If we tip that spine back, the weight shifts back, we're falling down. So take a look again at the ankle, right? So we've got that ankle super flexed right here. There's a lot of bend in that ankle. And a lot of flex in that ankle, a lot of flex in the knee, right? A lot of flex back here in this hip socket. So all those joints are flexing. Where in the back leg, they're all extending just a little, not completely. I'm not standing on my tiptoe. Note right here, my heel's off the ground right here. So if you look back here, you can see it just barely. My heels come off the ground, but this ankle is still bent. And you need to keep that ankle bent. This knee is still slightly bent, right? We do that because we still have to land in good posture. And if this leg were to completely straighten out, if we totally straighten this leg out, we'd put ourselves in a forward position that we wouldn't be able to recover from. So be really cautious and aware of that. Now, what this feels like to me when I do this drop-in is it feels like the lead half of my body collapses like an accordion. I feel pressure building in my front ankle where it bends. I feel the muscles, tendons, ligaments all kind of binding a little bit right here, just a little, because I'm actually lifting my toes to allow, when I lift my toes up, right? So let's do this differently. If I lift my toes up like this, that allows me to bend this knee better, right? So if the ankle bends, the knee can bend. When the knee bends, the hip has to bend a little bit. They all work together. If you were only to bend your knee, you'd be balanced back towards your heels, and that wouldn't work out. So look at that. All three of those joints are flexing evenly. The spine is tipping forward. And then I get into this free fall zone. And this is a really important thing. And you'll note that my posture remains pretty much the same as I'm in this free fall zone. So let's get it back to play. We'll back it up a little bit here. Now, there's that position where the nose has started to fall in, right? Right here. Got everything shifted. Spine, I can feel right here. Really quick thing. Right here, I feel my belly touching, you know, that side of my abdomen touching that part of my thigh right there. I feel that. I feel the curve of my spine. I can feel it over here in my ribs, right? I feel my stomach muscles crunching. I absolutely feel myself holding this knee up to my chest. So these are sensations you want to have, which sounds weird. It seems like you want to push that leg down. You don't want to push that leg down. You want to hold that knee up and fall in this position. It feels like falling because you are falling. So just look at it. I'm tipping over like a tree for a few frames. Watch right here. How many frames is that? 1, 2, let's see. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. 6 frames before I start to extend my leg. Now this all happens fast, but just think of it as you want to feel yourself falling until your front foot has dropped closer to the level of your back foot. And once that happens, right? Now the 2 feet are coming closer into alignment here. Now I'm going to get, as I draw closer to this tranny and I wait as long as I can, I try to hold that knee up as long as I can, then I'm going to extend this leg down and stomp. And this is the mistake most people make. They step up and they try to push the nose down right away. They use the front leg to push the nose down. And what happens when you use the front leg to push the nose down is you force your weight back. So you'll see, I'll throw a couple of little video clips up on here so you can see what that looks like. But if I extend my lead leg while my back leg is bent, my weight's going to go towards my back foot and I'm going to fall. I'm going to slip right down that tranny, just like, you know, you've seen every other person who's failed. You usually don't see people fall forward. More often you see them fall backwards because they try to push the nose down. So here's the push of that nose. You can see my front leg is now extending. And I'm a little bit on my back foot right here. You can see my back leg is bent more than my front leg because I extended my front leg probably just a little too soon for that drop in. So if I were to time that differently, I'd go back and I'd wait a little longer to extend my front leg to push the wheels down. But take a look at that again. There's the extension of that lead leg. Now notice that the lead leg never got straight. It's still bent. So the joints, this is really important. The joints of the legs are relatively similar in their position. So right now we know that this leg is bent a little more than this leg is because you can see it just by the length of the legs. You can tell that this ankle right here is more open than that ankle. This knee is less bent than that knee. This hip now is bent more than this hip, right? So you can see those different alignments. It's really important that that doesn't become so dramatic that your front leg, say if it were totally straight, right? So if that front leg got totally straight, I'd have too much weight on the back foot, I'm falling down. If the shoulder right here started to tip up this way, I am absolutely going to fall backwards. If my spine, instead of being on this line right here, we're on a line that looks more like this right here. Sorry, switch that back to my arrow. My spine were more on this line, I'm falling backwards, right? So all these factors are critically important and you have to know what it feels like to stay in that forward position, to have the spine flex forward, to what it really feels like to bend both ankles and each one of them independently so that you can have the lead leg shorter than the rear leg. So if we walk that back, right, you're going to see that I start out with the rear leg longer than the front leg, right? It kind of makes sense that I finish a little bit with the lead leg longer than the front leg. And then look at that. Right after I land, there's that difference. And now one frame later, I'm getting even. Those legs are both bent a lot again. And this is so critical that you can really get a sense of the core position relative to the length of the legs. So if you just take a look again, I'll highlight it for you. Here's that core, right? It's this area right here. Take a look at the legs and how flexed they are, right? So we got a line like this, line like that, line like this, and that. Both legs are pretty evenly flexed. The back leg's bent a little more than the front, so I'm a little bit on my back foot. That's to be expected when you skate, especially if your stance is a little open. So get back to that rotary alignment stuff we talked about before. If your shoulders are turned open a little bit, you're going to be on your back foot a little bit. So these are things that I can correct when I'm practicing my drop ins. But if I align my hips and my shoulders, that my hips will not align unless my ankles and knees allow it. So for me to align my hips, I'd have to flex my lead, my right ankle and right knee to the same degree that my back ankle or my left ankle and left knee are flexed. If they're even, my hips are aligned, I'm generally going to have even weight distribution across the length of the board. And then where my foot position is really matters because I'll be in a position where if I'm positioned a little bit towards the tail of the board, but my body is aligned so that my core is between my feet, then I've got a little bit of pressure on the back of the board and I'm not going to bind those front wheels. It works really, really well. And these are all finite adjustments that you would make So here it is from the beginning, right? We walk up, we position the board how we want it. We get our back foot right where we want it. So it's across the length of it's across the width of the tail, right on the back end of the tail, with the inside edge of the foot against that crease, the heels touching the concrete to stabilize the board. Once we got that foot locked in and we can hold the board, and you'll see I'll pull my hand away. I'll start picking up my front foot. I relax a little bit right here. Focus. Now, really critical factor. What are you looking at? I look right where I want to go. I look right down to the bottom of that tranny. I'm not looking out across the tranny. I'm looking right down just ahead of where my wheels are going to land. And you can see that if you look real close here. You get a kind of a feel for where my eyes are directed, right out here, somewhere right out there, right? Pretty simple stuff. So we're looking in the right place. We're ready. So we're going to go right into this front foot. I position the front foot, get it right where I want it, make sure I'm stable. And now here comes the movement. I start drawing that lead shoulder down, keeping that knee up, bending the ankle, and I'm tipping that lead leg forward towards the nose as far as I can. Remember, nose hasn't even dropped here yet. I'm way out over my board. I've shifted my core out over the transition. My core was back here on top of the deck. Right now, my core is aligned right here. Put a little bubble right there for you to watch. About where the core is there, center of the core. And now as we play it forward, you're gonna see that mass. That mass is going to move well ahead of that point. See how far it gets before the nose drops. Wow, way out ahead of that point now. And you can see my core is now balanced, kind of where the arrow is pointing, but if I draw new lines, my core is now balanced. Right out over the transition. And this is really important. So here's that core location again. And you can see it's balanced well out over the tranny now. So that's that shift. We got to get the core to move out over from the deck, out over the transition, while keeping the lead side of our body all flexed up like an accordion, crunching together, soaking it in. And we hold it there. We fall in that position. So we got to get that sort of free fall feeling in that position for a split second. Free fall, free fall, free fall, stomp. And there's the stomp. Now look at where I'm looking. I'm looking across to where I'm going to go, which is that next transition on the other side of this little bowl section. And I focus on getting aligned. And just in this case, I didn't pump out. I didn't extend my legs in the down training to build speed. I just stayed low and rode through. I ride that thing out. And I go right into that little gentle bank on the other side. Perfect. This is an awesome spot to learn to drop in. But you got to find your own spot that works like that, or build it. You know, there's plenty of DIY plans I can point you to that are awesome for building little backyard ramps or driveway ramps, that kind of thing. And my recommendation to anybody starting out is that you look at building a bank to a transition. So you get bank to tranny, it's awesome. Then you have a gentle side, you have an intense side, you can practice all kinds of tricks. It makes your life, super easy. And they are pretty easy to build if you want to take the time to do it. Don't be afraid of getting some tools and getting in there. It's fun. So remember all the pieces. You got to know how to position your foot on the tail. You got to know how to hold the board against the coping with your heel on the concrete to pinch it and lock it in. Then you got to position that front foot perfectly, right? Then you got to get your shoulder down, core forward, lead leg tipped forward. I always like to think of my lead leg like a joystick, like for a video game, like analog joysticks. If I tip that lead leg forward towards the nose, then I get really good action. It actually helps draw my core out there. So I get the lead leg tipped forward, my hips move forward, my core moves forward, my shoulders tip down. I put that all together. I free fall, free fall, free fall, stomp by extending the lead leg, then recenter myself and skate out of that drop in. Now, I want to kind of key you into some of the fears. Like even to this day, when I drop into a higher transition, and I don't claim to be a great skater, but you know, I'm confident and I can drop in on most transitions. When I roll up to a higher transition, I still feel like a beginner. I get all the same nervous tension, the butterflies in my stomach. And the only thing that saves me is having a routine. Have a mental process to help you overcome your emotions. You can even see the look on my face right there. That's a look of, here we go, I'm gonna drop in. It's like that nervous look, right? But I go through that process because that helps remind me to trust the movements. So I go through the movements in my head. I visualize those movements and I feel those movements. I make sure I feel what I'm seeing in my head, because if you can feel it, you can execute it. If you just see in it, you may not execute it. Remember, think about what it's going to feel like. Once I've gone through that process, once I've stood there and I've gone through that visualization process where I'm feeling the moves I'm going to make, then I put the board in place and then I get ready to roll. You go through the same thing. I check, I make sure I feel that thing. You see me wiggling the board to lock it in right there. I'm going to push it till I feel it lock in. Then I put my back foot on. I hold the board till my back foot's secure. Then I let go with the front hand, put the front foot on, make sure it's in the right spot. Take a deep breath, go. And exhale. I take a deep breath, I drop in, I exhale on my way down. It helps me. It's the way I've always done it. But that one little breath move and having the mental process before you get there will really help you overcome some of those fears. And I use a lot of rules, like if you're standing there and you count 1, 2, 3, go, and you can't go, step away. Walk all the way away from the transition, go skate, go do something else and come back to it. When you get up there, if you can count to 3 and go, great. So go through your process. And in the beginning, it's okay to have a process of deep breath, 1, 2, 3, move, drop. Those are great mental, emotional triggers. And if they aren't working, you're not ready. So it's not just about being physically ready. It's not about having the balance on your skateboard. It's about having the mental and emotional confidence and stability to execute what you need to execute. Because when you're afraid, you will make the wrong movements. When you are afraid on that, let's get into a few of the different things that you can do to break this down, right? So the first thing I want you to do is I want you to practice what it feels like to tip the board up on the tail and balance, drop in on your carpet. Just get on some carpet or go out in the grass so your wheels can't roll, fully stop, it's not gonna slip out from underneath you, and practice those movements. And you're gonna start with what it feels like to tip that lead joystick forward, right? And then, so that rolls that knee forward. You're gonna feel that core shifting forward as you hold the knee up and your body squishes together like an accordion, right? And then you're gonna feel yourself fall in that position and then stomp down late. Catch yourself as late as you can. Think of it as a catch. When you reach out to stomp down, that's you catching yourself from falling forward. Catch yourself as late as you can and practice that over and over again until you're not rolling off the nose of the board and you're not just pushing the board down. So I want you to practice what it would feel like to move into and right out of the tail stall. So, or of a tail stall rather. So dropping is you're balanced on your tail. Tail stall, I want you to feel like pick up and set down. So a really good game to play with yourself. This is in an area where you can roll. Is can you suck the front knee up and then stomp the nose down and get your tail to touch for just a split second on the concrete. You don't want to balance on it. You're not shifting your weight way back on your back foot. And what this teaches you is this teaches you how to stay forward, keep your body forward, and lift the front up by sucking the knee up and bending the ankle, knee, and hip to suck that knee up and keeping your shoulder down. So you're just going to practice a quick pick up and then put back down, pick up, put back down. And the weight never transfers to the back foot, but the tail will touch because the board will lever. So you're not balancing on the back foot. You're just tap, 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 tap. And you get to feel for that position of that free fall position. You actually get to feel it in real time. It's a great practice tool. Next, I want you to get a friend and set yourself up so that you can go up and balance on the coping and just practice balancing. And one of my favorite things to do is to stand holding the nose of the board. And I put my knee under the board and let the nose rest right on my knee. And then I have my friend practice rocking out onto shifting the weight and their core out over my knee, and I just stabilize them so they don't fall, but they get to see what it feels like to do that movement up on the from the deck and from the coping. The next move I want you to try is the foot coping drop. Now this requires a buddy, and it's really simple. First, I place my foot up about not even a third of the way up the little tranny. Then I'm going to make sure that I hold the board against my foot for my friend, and in a position where I can hold one hand and hold the board at the same time. Then I have them position their foot so that their heel touches the surface of the transition and is on the tail, so they can hold the board there just like they would up on the deck. And then I have them practice picking up. And as soon as they go, I just take their front hand and their back hand and I tip them forward. They roll right off my foot. It's really nice. It doesn't smash your foot. Just be careful. But your foot fits right in there, and they're just balancing a little bit against the surface of your shoe. And it's really a simple move. Such an incredible little tip to get you over your fear, because then you get to drop in just a little ways up the tranny. Nothing to be afraid of. So you still need to be careful, but it's way less scary. And then from there, you can practice. If you don't have that, another great way to practice is to find a bank. So not a transition, not a curved transition with coping. Find a bank and practice up on the deck, balancing on your tail, drop in and roll down. Then scooch forward to where when you drop in, your board's actually going to land over the little transition, that corner lip from the deck to the tranny. So you're going to drop in and your center of your board's not going to touch that. You're just going to land on your wheels and roll right over. You're going to feel a little bump on your back wheels. And then you can take it all the way to, you can have your tail, and you can use this copingless bank, nice gentle bank. Put your tail right on the bank and have your wheels down on the inside of the bank and practice dropping in right there. It's a great way to get over your fear, and lots of reps, trying to feel those movements that we've talked about that are hopefully this helps you overcome some of your fears about dropping in and gives you the knowledge that you need to know what you have to execute. And you can go out and practice these things one at a time, simple things first, and work your way through the whole process and build up your confidence. And find a buddy, find someone that that will help you. Don't be afraid to have someone. I know it's not the coolest thing in the world to have someone hold your hands, but way more fun to have someone hold your hand and get over it than it is to drop in on your own and slam. Trust me on that one. I went through it the hard way.
To help you learn how to skateboard and understand more about skateboarding. If this video helped you, be sure to hit us up in the comments below and tell us what you'd like us to focus on for our next video. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to give it a like and then subscribe to our channel and tell your friends all about us. If you'd like to learn more about the United States Skateboard Education Association, please visit www.ussea.us, where you can learn more about how to skate, learn more about helping others learn how to skate, and become a certified skateboard coach.